Good morning. Last week, we reflected on David's experience of being called to fulfill what was considered a simple errand, which thrusted him in the national spotlight as he ended up having to undertake the responsibility to confront and fight and slay Goliath to give Israel a victory over the Philistines. Today, our text, 1 Samuel 18, 1-16, highlights David receiving an assignment from God to go to the king's palace, to use his musical skills, to play music, to soothe him during times when he experienced the depressive encounters. To go to the King Saul's palace and use his musical talent in the service of the Lord, David found himself sharing in what he perhaps considered as his dream assignment. This assignment would afford him the opportunity to display his talent among the influencers of the society. This assignment also allowed him to operate within his comfort zone. There's nothing more comforting to be as engaged in doing the thing you enjoy most in life. The assignment also allowed David to get a first-hand experience of what life was like inside the palace. You see, David had the idea that someday he may become king. He had heard the cultural artists and the women singing songs that promoted him to becoming a leader in Israel. He took seriously the thought, and I believe he reveled the opportunity to be on the inside of the palace, finding out how it worked and interacting with the movers and shakers of the community. This assignment would allow him to gain valuable experience living among the royal family and the influencers of the society. David may have taken the time to tell his friends of his dream assignment and even prayed prayers of thanks to God for being so favorably disposed towards him and considering him as a reward for his dream assignment. Soon after accepting and turning up for his assignment, David's quote-unquote dream became a nightmare, as King Saul's emotional, psychological, and spiritual challenges resulted in him becoming insane, insecure, and insensitive. David had a big problem he may not have anticipated. He has a reality check, as King Saul was subjected to bouts of depression, demonic possession and oppression, erratic and violent conduct, which was now a threat to David's safety and security. In fact, his life was now threatened, as King Saul attempted to kill him as he threw the javelin at him during those depressive bouts. David is now faced with an important question: how do I fulfill my assignment in this toxic environment? His ministry goal of using his musical gift to minister to the king and the royal family by bringing comfort in their depressive moment. David's survival in the palace was now a matter of deep concern. Should he abandon his assignment and seek to preserve his life? If he has to be looking over his shoulder every day, what is the quality of service he now is able to deliver in this context of intense insecurity? Like David, there are times when we are faced with challenging circumstances in ministry, and we have to make major decisions regarding our continued engagement. What lessons can we learn from David's response to his ministry challenge? Though he became disappointed by King Saul's negative attitude and reaction towards him, David accepted that he was assigned by God to minister to the king and tried to maintain his composure and showed up for duty. He was committed to using his musical skills to bring healing to an emotionally and spiritually challenged king, his family, and his team. As we give consideration to how to react to these challenging and toxic ministry environment due to instability among community members, whether in our homes, places of worship, employment, or in our community where we reside, let us learn from David. Constantly remind yourself that it was the Lord who assigned you to your ministry task. Accept that the Lord has a purpose for your assignment, even when you may not see it in the challenging circumstances with which you are faced. In the moments when you are faced with stressful situations that often cause us frustration, anxiety, and suffering, the tendency is to avoid and even abandon our assignment in order to preserve ourselves. We need to remind ourselves that God is with us and He will never abandon us. In Matthew 18, when the Lord was commissioning His disciples to go into the world to make disciples, He gave them the assurance that all authority in heaven and earth was assigned to Him, so they should confidently go and fulfill their mission. We are continuing this mission. Be spiritually perceptive. Identify and use the resources God has made available to you. It is to ensure your survival. Generally, when we find ourselves in emotionally and spiritually toxic ministry environment, we tend to indulge in self-pity, like Elijah's experience with King Ahab and Jezebel. We tell ourselves, and sometimes God, that we are alone in the situation. David, by his conduct, has taught us that when we find ourselves in these toxic environments, we are to look to God to provide us invaluable human resources who will become our ears, eyes, and hands. Despite the hostility of King Saul to David in the palace, God provided support for David from Saul's very household. Jonathan emerged from the toxic environment to become David's friend and protector. David could have become depressed himself and engaged in self-pity, becoming self-absorbed and missed the opportunity for social interaction and failed to respond to Jonathan's social interactions. However, he declined such an attitude and he was favorably disposed towards Jonathan. My encouragement: be open to what God is doing around and among you. Spiritually perceptibility comes from being intimate with God. Intimacy with God comes from being in His presence, seeking His will through prayer and medication. As Psalm 1 declares, His delight is in the law of God, and in His law He meditates day and night. Jonathan proved to be a genuine friend and protector of David by looking out for his safety as he stood between David and his father. What a provision from the Lord. Remember, He promises never to leave nor forsake us, even in our most toxic relationship. Amen.